Okay, so this is a series book. It's a 1,300-page book. It is a line-by-line commentary that explains or comments about every single line of our basic text. And why did I write that? Why did I go to that trouble? Okay, this is a book born out of deep sorrow and deep personal pain. And I'll put my hands on the table. It comes from my self-seeking. It comes directly from my self-seeking as an alcoholic, because I wish everyone could learn to love our basic text in the way that I love it. Okay. And that's not to excuse parts of it that are very, very problematic and troublesome for some people. Now, I'm going to ask you to do a bit of extra labour who's in this audience, because some of you won't at all relate to the things I'm going to tell you. And you might have had a very lovely, smooth ride in AA, and it might have all been very wonderful for you. But I'm going to ask you to trust me that what I'm telling you isn't a lie. It's my experience, and it is borne out from the experience of other people as well, where AA, meetings of AA aren't necessarily a helpful place for all of us. Okay, so this book was written from a place of sorrow, because it was I've had the privilege of working with countless women and a smattering of men in the time I've been sober. It's been my privilege to do so. And that's all good. You know, those sorts of people are open enough to say, oh, I identify with her. Perhaps she's got something I might want, sobriety. I can talk to her about that. So that's one half of it. But it's really written for the thousands of people outside who walk into AA and walk straight out again. And what I hear over and over, and not just from newcomers, is that, for example, the big book language is patriarchal and moralistic. No thanks, I'm not interested. I hate God. I'm fleeing from church abuses. The chapter 2 wives is intolerable. His wife didn't even write it. I'm not interested. I'm not an employer. Why would I read to employers? Things like, I'm never getting on my knees for anyone or anything. I don't believe. I'm not praying. I'm a feminist. The language makes me angry. I'm not represented in any of the stories. My identity isn't valid in this book. Things like, I find it hard to trust people. I don't want to tell a sponsor my life story. You can't tell me I'm powerless. I can do things. I get told in meetings that I can't get sober unless I get God. I do not have a part in my childhood trauma. It is abhorrent to shame victims. And I've been told I'm not sober if I have to take medication. I ask someone to sponsor me and they won't. And that is ad infinitum. That is just a selection of things I've heard over the years, okay? And when we roll back those complaints, we can find, or I found, that none of them are based in the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nowhere does it say in there that I have to do a life story and tell my sponsor. That's not what the words life story mean in that context. For example, you're not powerless. You're powerless over alcohol. But yes, I've got power. I'm quite dynamic in certain situations. Around alcohol, I've got no power. I used to get told I can't get sober unless I get God. And the point we're missing out there is God of my own conception, of my understanding, you know, that door that opens up a seat that I can take. And all of these things are, sadly, not based in what I found that is deeply clear in our basic text, but it's overlooked, and for no one's fault, because the book is very difficult to get into if it's the kind of literature that doesn't sit right with you, and that's no one's fault. It's just my primary purpose is to carry a message that I've changed as a result of the steps. And when I say, this is what I did, I read these pages, the tools don't seem to be as attractive as perhaps they were 10, 20, however many years ago. So these barriers mean that people leave before they find hope, and some never come back, and too many are dying without ever experiencing the promises. So my truth is that I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of taking steps. I've had a profound alteration in my reaction to life, which is from page 567. I've had a spiritual awakening of the educational variety. William James explains that in the appendix, which means that I didn't have the same thing happen to me that Bill W. has happened to him. He has a creator God, a father of lights. I don't have that. I didn't have it, and I may never have it. Yet what I do have is this clear-cut instructions of taking action. And those actions delivered me this profound psychic change. And I'll explain later when I get into it why It's a program of action and not a program of faith or belief. And the big book supports that entirely. So I may never fully understand, and that's okay. An unsure conception or no conception is still a conception. And the big book doesn't require theological certainty, although the language of the book is theologically certain. Bill's language is very theologically certain. You know, may you find him now. It's quite definite, the tone of it. And for anyone who does believe, page 87, be quick to see where religious people are right. You know, none of what I'm saying will serve you, and it's not meant to change your mind. It's just with a view of, is there a way to be of maximum usefulness to everyone here, and to give everyone the beauty and the joy and the peace and happiness that many of us receive as a result of doing the work. Okay, so why this book matters. It tackles every objection and explains every sentence. It's loyal to the big book, and it's valuable. It's valuable for those who do believe, because if I was to say to you, what does two employers tell you about boundary setting in the modern day? That's a question that many people might not know the answer to, because to employers, you think it's to the employer. But if we look beneath that text, there's some phenomenal advice around setting boundaries. Equally, to wives, an abominable chapter in many ways. But beneath some of those tricky pieces of language and tone, there's actually some life-saving truths if we just pick them out. So I'm just trying to stand apart from the things that are difficult for everyone, for a lot of people, and show you that there is still a way. There is still a way to have your life saved by this text. And it isn't just for atheists or for the religious. It's for everyone seeking a way through, with every action and spiritual direction clearly shown and explained. For example, when I was wondering about a certain, how I would sponsor somebody, it said in working with others, there's a phrase in there that says something like, stand with him until he's made his decision. And I thought, well, what are they on about? And it's actually make his decision to take step 3, the step 3 decision. So nothing's exactly clear. And unless you've got a really quick mind, and I didn't, I found it hard to know, like, in these tiny words and these metaphors and language, like the actions are kind of hidden in some ways. And none of what I'm telling you is original. This is just stuff people have told me, and my first sponsor particularly. So that's why I wrote it, with just a gut feeling of sorrow. So what's in the book? Okay, so the things that hold people up, the things that people stumble on, the things that I stumbled on. I'm one of those resistant alcoholics that has to have an answer. Unfortunately, my brain is one of those brains. Yet it wasn't a barrier for me to get lasting permanent sobriety. And the book talks about permanent sobriety, doesn't it? And that's another deep joy. It's not a fragile thing. It's a very wonderful thing. So there's a note on language. There's a bit about me. And there's a couple of pages on something called If You Pray, Pray, and If You Think, Think, to show you that I'll get onto that. It's a beautiful thing, and it's the unlocking part of one of the most powerful aspects of this program, that even as a non-believer, I pray in what people would think as prayer. I direct my thinking in that way. And if I don't, very bad things happen to my mind. I cannot think my way into good health. I cannot think my way into good thinking. Myself cannot fix myself. I have to ask for my 4 defects to be removed. And that's just how it is. It's not my message. That is just what it says. And it just happens to work for me and apparently millions of others. So I talk about every single sentence in the foreword to the first edition, which is the hidden gem that opens the door. Forward to the second edition, which is the birth of a new dawn. The doctor's opinion, which is the doorway to the truth. Bill's story, who's a man smart enough to lose everything. And there is a solution, which is not a theory. It is a lifeline. And we get on to more about alcoholism, the death grip of the lie. And that is where the mental obsession lie that we delude ourselves with, that I can maybe moderate my drinking, that I can just have one, it won't hurt. I've been sober a few days, it's going to be fine. That if you'd had my childhood, and that maybe I can beat the odds, and maybe the lie that I tell myself to my grave, that's where this gets smashed. And then we get into We Agnostics, which is Bill Wilson's blind spot, unfortunately. The genius, pioneering, life-saving Bill W., who I love for all of his flawed imperfections of the alcoholic that I share. his blind spot, and we'll get into that. How it works, the straight line between life and death, that's where the rubber hits the road. And then into action, there's no more thinking, it's do the work. Working with others, this is how we stay free. And to wives, which is a controversial mirror of its time. And then it goes on like that. And so you've got a complete second edition text. So the whole 164 pages plus Dr. Wobb's stories in there. Complete second edition text. There's commentary after every line. It's fully searchable. It explains the God sections for non-believers in line with what our text says. And it gives you historical and cultural context. I didn't know who Tugboat Annie was. I didn't really know what Bathtub Jim was exactly. I didn't know what Scylla and Charybdis means. All the stuff. I'm reading it and I'm just thinking, what is this? What does this mean? Is this relevant? Do I need this to stay alive or don't I? So that's essentially what's in the book. What drives people away? It's the language. It's the language. And this is where I'm asking you to trust me, because sometimes some of us, the language isn't problematic at all. But more and more and more people are alienated by the language. They really, truly, truly are. So alcohol does not, and this is what I say about the language. This is my opinion. Okay. So you absolutely are happy to disagree with this or reject this. This is my opinion piece here. Alcohol does not discriminate, and neither should recovery. It crosses every boundary: gender, race, class, belief, identity, and so must any book that seeks to help. If this commentary honours the big book's life-saving message, it must also be radically inclusive. Everyone seeking freedom from alcohol deserves to feel reflected, respected, and welcomed here. This is a sentence-by-sentence analysis of the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a text that has saved millions of lives, including mine. But it was written in 1939 in the language and worldview of its time. It's both revolutionary and, at times, problematic. The language can be alienating, even offensive. Gendered assumptions, patriarchal tone, religious framing, these have driven countless people away before they could find the transformation inside. I've seen it happen with sorrow. This commentary exists to open that door again, gently and honestly. I do not endorse the outdated language or stereotypes. They reflect the era and not the truths beneath. I stand apart from those elements so the message of permanent sobriety can be accessible to everyone, regardless of gender, identity, background, belief or class. I remain faithful to the spiritual architecture of the 12 steps, which I walked as an agnostic and seen transform lives. This isn't a rewrite, but a translation line by line, directly and honestly. So where the big book says he, him or God, I'm inviting you here to substitute what honours your truth. And this might be self-evident to so many of you, but it really isn't self-evident to so many. So this is the sort of permission piece, you know, where the big book says that. And we always think back to it's our understanding, our own conception. We have permission in the text. But if you can't get people to the permission in the text, we fail. I fail. So you may substitute what honours your truth, they, she, you, we, the alcoholic, or whatever fits. For God, read a power greater than ourselves, inner wisdom, nature, truth, love, whatever lifts you beyond self-will. You are not required to fit the text. The text can be shaped to fit you. I know this can ask a lot, especially if religion, exclusion, or invisibility have hurt you. I would not ask you unless I believe the process described here can free you. It freed me. And that's why I wrote this book, to walk with you sentence by sentence through the old language into timeless truth. I will make mistakes and I'm limited by my own background and blind spots. And if something here causes harm or falls short of the dignity and inclusivity I aim for, I welcome correction. I hold deep reverence for the big book and a responsibility to reduce the harm it can cause when it's read uncritically. So this commentary stays faithful while making the message accessible today. This is where I pass the baton to you to translate any words that don't serve you, so nothing stands between you and the solution. So whether you're an atheist or agnostic, religious, spiritual but not religious, or unsure, you are welcome here. Whether living with visible or invisible disabilities, mental health challenges, or neurodivergence, you are not outside this circle. You do not need to believe anything in advance. You only need willingness. May this guide help you stay sober and become free. And that is also not my opinion. Let me tell you why that's not my opinion. Bill Wilson, for all of his linguistic challenges, he was very precise and laser guided with his vocabulary in certain areas, especially in the steps. And he borrowed something from the Bible. He borrowed a phrase, faith without works is dead. Okay, and that does come from the Bible, but it's not biblical in our book, in strictly. It's in my big book, so I can discount the source in many ways, right? So he says that 3 times in the first 76 pages, right? If Bill W. says something once, it's probably a good idea that I listen in my experience. If he says it twice, my life does depend on it, just in my experience. And if Bill W. says like 3 times, it means, that's in a box of marked uranium, do not touch it. It is that important. So he said that 3 times, faith without works is dead, which means no amount of faith or belief counts here. It's the works, it's the actions I take that are important. It doesn't matter what I believe. It doesn't matter the faith I have. Otherwise we wouldn't have drunk vicars and drunk nuns. They believe so hard, and their Jesus cannot and will not save them. Only under certain conditions of the 12 steps can we be saved. Okay, and I use that word salvation in those terms. But the important thing is the actions are not religious. They are actions of looking at my defects, making amends, spiritual principles like behaving with love and tolerance and humility. These can be an ethical framework to live by, in addition to them being sacred. It's not important what I believe. I can make a start, and I might never believe, and that's okay, because it's the actions. Faith without works is dead. So let's move on. I'm going to tackle the chapter that pushes more alcoholics out the door than any other chapter. It's the most difficult chapter for somebody who doesn't know, or who absolutely doesn't believe in God. So philosophically, I'm an agnostic, right? Because I cannot know, and I don't have certainty. I just can't know. I don't know. More than likely in my day-to-day life, I operate from the point of view of being an atheist, because I just haven't got evidence of that kind of thing operating in my life, right? So Bill W. here is speaking to the agnostic. He's speaking to me. He's trying to convince me. He's making his case why someone with a mind like mine, or any agnostic or non-believer, should believe, right? And this is spoken in the hope that the book helps people stay in the fellowship long enough to recover, and to help understand that there is no one single definition of spiritual or God in the 12 steps. The 12 steps don't define God or spirituality at all. The outcome of my actions is my outcome. And I'm sure everyone's outcome of their actions is their outcome. I've taken women through the book who end up kind of agnostic. I've taken women through the book who have a very, very strong relationship with Jesus. I've taken women through the book who become Wiccan, Buddhists. I don't get involved in the outcome of all that. That's their spiritual path. And that's the beauty, isn't it? So let's think about what Bill's trying to do here. He's trying to convince me, or someone like me, that belief in a God is important. Okay, and I admire his guts. I admire his guts to take this on. He wouldn't have predicted, however many years down the line, he'd have come across such pain as a result of these words. So this chapter is different, and this is somewhat opinionated. This is somewhat of an opinion, but as I outlined before, the 12 steps do not ask me to agree with Bill W.'s conception, or Bill W.'s God, or Bill W.'s experience. Nowhere in the 12 steps does it say, step 1, agree with Bill. It doesn't ever say that. Okay, so let's just, and also if you do believe and you've got an Abrahamic kind of God, page 87, be quick to see where religious people are right. That is a beautiful thing, and protect that with your life. You've got everything that you could possibly want in terms of spirituality, and some of us just don't. So this stuff that I'm talking about now will not serve you in any way, and I'll say to you, I'll get to that bit in a minute. So this chapter is different. It's written for people like me, those of us who came to Alcoholics Anonymous powerless over alcohol, but also spiritually unconvinced, people who didn't believe in a personal God, or who found the language of the big book difficult to reconcile with intellectual honesty. If you are somebody who prays easily, who believes in a guiding creator, God, or who has no quarrel with the chapter We Agnostics, please feel free to skip this chapter and move on to the next. There is nothing in here that will serve you better than what you already know and live, and protect that. If that's you, protect that and ignore the rest with kindness and love. But for others, for those who have wrestled with the chapter We Agnostics, who felt marginalised or misrepresented by it, or who stayed in the fellowship in spite of it, this chapter is for you. It is a line-by-line engagement with Bill Wilson's arguments, and it is not an attack. It is not written with resentment. It is written with profound reverence and gratitude for the program of the 12 steps, and with a willingness to explore the problems in one of the big book's most problematic sections. The chapter We Agnostics asks a great deal of the reader. In attempting to reach agnostics and atheists, Bill Wilson, and with a willingness to explore the problems in one of the big book's most problematic sections. The chapter We Agnostics asks a great deal of the reader. In attempting to reach agnostics and atheists, Bill Wilson steps into some of the most challenging areas of human thought: logic, theology, epistemology, even the mystery of quantum mechanics. These are weighty subjects, and any serious response must meet them on their own terms. So what follows is, I hope, a clear, accessible response for those of us who felt, as I did, that something in We Agnostics rings false, but who still trust the enduring power of the 12 steps. It offers a direct response to where We Agnostics falls short, and affirms what still holds, that the program works. Spiritual experience is not granted by theology, it is experienced through action. Yet when addressing agnosticism and atheism, particularly in the chapter We Agnostics, Bill Wilson's limitations are evident. His attempt to appeal to non-believers is philosophically weak and rhetorically coercive. Rather than engaging sincerely with non-theistic worldviews, he frames doubt as a transient defect centered in fear, pride, or obstinacy. He leans heavily on logical fallacies, chiefly the false dilemma that recovery demands belief in a deity, and the strawman characterization of agnostic as emotionally or morally defective. His arguments substitute anecdotal storytelling and the appeal to emotion for genuine philosophical reasoning. The underlying message is clear: disbelief must be overcome, not honoured. However, it's crucial to recognise that the enduring power of Alcoholics Anonymous does not rest on the persuasiveness of Bill Wilson's apologetics. It rests on the practical architecture of the 12 steps themselves, a process that, when followed exactly as laid out, reliably produces the psychic change, the awakening necessary for recovery. Thus, while We Agnostics remains a dated and philosophically flawed attempt to address non-believers, the living structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, through its steps, its traditions, and its evolving history, transcends these early limitations. Though through action honestly taken, the fellowship offers a spiritual awakening accessible to all, regardless of metaphysical belief. So for atheists and agnostics who take the steps thoroughly, the results are no less profound. Through rigorous inventory, fearless amends, and sustained service, they access a genuine power, an awakening of conscience, courage, and integrity without recourse to a supernatural deity. Okay, so Bill Wilson may have failed to fully imagine a recovery accessible to enduring non-belief, but the program he built transcends that failure. It's not belief that saves lives, it's action honestly taken. And on a personal note, let me say this: I believe Bill Wilson was a genius. A flawed genius. He was a genius, though. He took spiritual principles that had been scattered across scripture, philosophy, psychology, and religion for millennia, and distilled them into the 12 steps, the 12 simple, clear, actionable steps. And for me, it's one of the most important spiritual documents of the 20th century, and it came from a stockbroker in early sobriety who had the humility to keep it practical and the courage to keep it spiritual. Okay? But even geniuses have blind spots, and We Agnostics is Bill's. It insists that belief is not only necessary but inevitable if you are willing and honest enough to try. And most fatally, it replaces the open invitation of the steps with theological certainty. And that's what Bill understood in the steps, but he forgot it in this chapter. And yet, the program still works. Why? Because the steps are stronger than the chapter that introduces them. Because actions still produce the awakening, even if belief doesn't follow. Because when I inventory my fears, make amends for my harms, and show up for others with nothing to prove, I change. Some people find God. Some people find conscience or an inner wisdom that wasn't accessible to them before. And some find a power that cannot be named. And all of us, if we work the program thoroughly, find freedom from alcohol, and then something far deeper than that. Next slide, please. So what do I do with this chapter? I name it for what I believe it is. It's an earnest but deeply flawed attempt by a brilliant man to speak to an experience he did not fully understand. He wasn't an agnostic. He had a thunderbolt experience, and he believed in a God who intervened, healed, and guided. And that experience was real for him. but it made him a poor translator for those of us who haven't had that experience and maybe never will. I don't believe this chapter needs to be deleted, but I do think it must be read as historical context and not as program instruction. The real message of AA is not that I must believe, it is that I must act. So the steps are one of the greatest spiritual technologies ever created. They work whether or not I believe in God, and they work because they are based in truth, humility and service, and they work because they ask me to show up, clean house and help others. I don't follow a belief system. I follow a method of the 12 steps. It's not fragile, it's not exclusive, and it doesn't demand agreement. It just demands willingness and work. So we agnostics may stumble, but the path it introduces is flawless. Okay, so now we get on to another thing that's quite tricky for someone who is unsure. And I think even religious people might struggle with doubt and fear and resentments around prayer and frustrations. So how does a non-believer get around the prayer part of the 12 steps? I'm just going to talk around this for a little while. When I realised I had to pray, look, I took my step 3 prayer with absolute earnestness because I was dying and my intellect hadn't quite come back, right? I was desperate and I could see that my sponsor had something here. And so I did pray. And my obsession to drink was removed at step 3. And then I took the steps really quickly, Dr. Bob style. I had no time to think, thank goodness. And I was delivered. That's the terminology of the book, isn't it? I became directed. I had an intuitive thought come to me. I became inspired in my thinking. I reacted. I had a profound alteration to how I react to life. And those sorts of things happened. From taking step 3, the mental obsession was removed. And the process worked. And then I did start thinking a little bit more deeply about this, and I did step 7, and I bought into the process, and I never felt comfortable with praying, although I did do it. And then after a while, I wondered what would happen if I didn't pray, and because I was never comfortable as a non-believer to use that word, it didn't sit right, and so I thought, well, okay, I'm just not going to do that. And very, very quickly, I ended up in a very, very bad place. So I've got experience that when I drifted from this program, an 11-step program, not only half measures avail me nothing, I've never had such pain as I have had when I skipped over what seemed to be very fundamentally important parts of this program. And how do people do it? I don't know how people do it, but this is how I got around it. And I'm sure it's not revolutionary. I'm sure loads of other people do it like this, but this is how it worked for me. When I leave out asking for my defects to be removed in step 7 as part of inventory or as part of my step 10, if I've got something stubborn and I can't think my way into not having a resentment, or I can't think my way into not being afraid, I have to identify that, and then I have to ask for its removal. And so what I do now is something that I call intentional directed thinking. And really, it's just prayer. So it's a slight semantic bit of mental gymnastics, but essentially I pray, even though I don't believe. I pray to something I don't believe in. And it sounds crazy, like we can send a man to the moon, and here I am praying to something I don't believe in. Is that the best we've got? But the thing is, it's astonishingly effective, and it's just ruthless and pragmatic, and it just seems to work. And essentially, the reason that this is not my opinion is because it's grounded in big book text, because the step 7 prayer is really clear. It says, when ready, we say something like this: my creator, I offer myself, da-da-da. And the word something is in there. When ready, we say something like this. The words aren't important. The words of my thinking or my prayer are not important. It's this spirit that I undertake it. Okay, so I can now look at every spiritual direction in the big book, every prayer, of which there are many prayers in the big book. If you'd like to scroll down, Andy, I'm going to get David to help me read some of these. I get to adapt Bill Wilson's beautiful prayers that are beautiful prayers. And I slipped in one that is my opinion, the St. Francis of Assisi prayer, and I'll get to that. And it means that I get to adapt prayer and yet still access all of the power of our program. So the step 3, 3rd step prayer. Okay, so I might say something along the lines of step 3, 3rd step prayer. Now, I didn't say this because I was absolutely dying. I was in a bad way. I just said it with my sponsor in floods of tears with all the earnestness at my command, and that's fine. I have introduced this concept about something, we say something. And I point out the line in the book where it says that, to give people permission to use whatever words resonate with them. And so instead of saying, God, I offer myself to thee to build me, blah, 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 I might ask to be built with and directed as life would have me. I might ask to be relieved of the bondage of myself so that I may better do what's right. I may ask that my difficulties be taken away so that victory over them would bear witness or show others the strength and love in a better way of life. I may ask to do what is right always. I'm asking. I'm intentionally directing my thinking outwards. I don't know who I'm asking, and I don't need to know. No one needs to know. I just cannot seem to get over not doing this part of the program. It's fatal for someone like me who cannot, the top 3 inches, the bad bit can't fix the bad bit. I'm stuck here. I'm in a big pickle if I don't do this. And then we look at step 4 inventory. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he'd have us be. So I ask for my fears to be removed and have my attention directed to what I'm meant to be. Step 5, we thank God from the bottom of our heart. I ask to remain grateful from the bottom of my heart. And the book just goes on and on and on with all of these directions, spiritual instructions. Step 7, my creator, I'm now willing. You know, for me, I'm a bit of a literalist and I haven't got the creator thing going on because I can't get into mythology around stuff like that. And just some people's brains cannot. We absolutely cannot. And in the chapter 2, Agnostics, Bill talks about essentially you'll only come good if you step from the bridge of doubt to the shore. And he wants us to get to the shore. Bill W wants me to get to the shore. And I'm saying, you know, I'm on the bridge of doubt, of not knowing. And that is a destination in itself. And that's okay, because elsewhere in the book, especially in the 12-step part, the bit that's really important to me, I don't need to be certain. I just have to do what's suggested.